Hey everybody, Sean from Media Assault here, and finally I am doing my countdown to Star Trek Into Darkness, episode number 5. This is actually going to include 2 films because of the delay that I had last week where I didn't get to watch Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, until yesterday, and I also watched Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, so I'm going to review both of them in this video. So it might be a little bit longer than usual, but what can I say? I apologize, but at least I'm on track and back on time. So I'll start with Star Trek V. This was released in 1989. There's the front of the Blu-ray, and there is the back. And this is the only one of the original 6 films, the 6 original cast films, that I never saw either in the theater or from beginning to end at home until I watched it last night. It played at the theater where I worked back in 1989, and I'd seen bits and pieces of it. And I'd also heard a lot of people speak rather negatively about it, so I never bothered watching it. And it was a relative box office failure. It was more of a disappointment than a failure. It did make money, but it did not make as much money as was hoped. The budget for it was about $33 million. It made about $63 million worldwide. And it almost, because of the sort of lackluster reception that it got from both critics and the public, it almost was the last of the Star Trek films involving the original cast. It tells the story of Sybok, who is Spock's half-brother, and he's sort of got this obsessive idea that he wants to, or he knows where he could find the equivalent of Earth's Christian Eden, or the place of creation of all of the major religions, whether it be human, Klingon, Romulan, whatever. And he's convinced he's found this place, and he hijacks the Enterprise to get there. So this is sort of an ambitious story. You know, a Vulcan takes the Enterprise to come face to face with God. At least that's what the intention is. So it's kind of heady. It's kind of ambitious. It was directed by William Shatner, and I'll be honest, the direction and the script are both pretty uneven. There are a lot of missteps, I guess, both in the humor in this film. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The special effects are really poor when compared to the previous 4 entries. And doing some reading, I saw that they had actually were supposed to be done by Industrial Light and Magic, but they were too expensive. Paramount didn't want to pay the bill for such expensive effects, so they went with someone else and contracted out some of the other effects work, and it just doesn't live up to the other 4 entries in the series. Lawrence Luckinbill plays Sybok, and he is the aforementioned half-brother to Spock. He does a really good job. His character's sort of an enigma. You can't really tell if he's evil or just misguided, but he is charismatic, and the performance is really good. I actually like the character. William Shatner came up with the original idea for the story for The Final Frontier, along with directing it, although he didn't write the actual screenplay. And he said that Sybok was inspired by televangelists, and that may have changed or become somewhat tempered in the final product, because he was looking at these televangelists as negative in his original seed of the film, I guess. And what we've got in this movie is someone who's just more sort of misguided or misunderstood, not necessarily evil. Although he is supposedly brainwashing people, they seem to be pretty okay with the fact, and there doesn't seem to be any negative repercussions for whatever he does to them. So it's kind of he's kind of an unusual character, Sybok. And this, even though it was one of the less well-received entries in the series, and like I said, it's one that I never watched from beginning to end until yesterday, I was actually kind of impressed. I liked it, and I thought it was better than I'd been led to believe that it was. So I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I actually enjoyed it. I realize it's probably one of the weaker films in the series, but it's still, I gotta say, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. And the friends that I watched it with last night, they actually said the same thing, that they liked it more as an adult than they did as when they were kids. So maybe it's just a matter of where we are in time when we see this movie, or what. I'm not sure, but I actually kind of liked Star Trek The Final Frontier. Like I said, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. The next entry is Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Here's the front, and there is the back. And this film almost wasn't made, like I said. It was directed and written by Nicholas Meyer. He is the guy responsible for Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which again was made, even though the film before it was not necessarily as big a success as it was hoped. And whether that's a coincidence or it was intentional, I'm not really sure, but they probably wanted to go to somebody that they thought could pull the franchise back up by its bootstraps, I guess. So Paramount was really cautious about this. They actually cut the budget of the film. I believe it was made for about $25 million. It ended up making $96 million. Even though it wasn't as successful as Star Trek IV, it still did make quite a bit of money, so it was looked upon as a relative success. This one takes more of a Cold War approach. It's more, I guess, current events related than any of the other Star Trek films, with the possible exception of Star Trek IV. It kind of echoes what was going on at the time when this was released in 1991, which was the fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of communism. And in this particular instance, what is happening is the Klingon Empire sort of substitutes for communism when there's a giant explosion on one of their mining moons called Praxis. And because of the damage it's going to do to their infrastructure and their ability to the impact it's going to make on their resources, and the fact that they spend so much money on their military budget, the end of the Klingon Empire is forecasted for about 50 years from this point in time where this happens. And so the Klingons are interested in coming to the negotiating table and asking for an end to the neutral zone, I guess. So that would the neutral zone, so it sort of substitutes for the Berlin Wall. Into that plot, there's a little bit of a mystery, kind of a whodunit, which involves the assassination of some Klingon ambassadors, or counselors, I guess, and their party. And the kind of ramifications that has on the Enterprise crew, because apparently somebody from the Enterprise is responsible. Kirk and McCoy actually end up taking the blame, even though they've tried to help. They end up being arrested and put on trial and are sentenced to a prison planet. So it's kind of an interesting plot. It's sort of almost a little bit of everything. You've got the humor from previous entries. You've got a little bit of a mystery story. You've got political intrigue. You've got the classic Federation versus the Klingon setup. You've got some alien races in there, a little bit of Romulan, Vulcan stuff. It's kind of a hodgepodge of different things from the series, at least the movie series, maybe a little bit from the TV series. But it all works, and I think that has to do with the fact that Nicholas Meyer wrote the script for this, and he's become, or at least for the two entries that he was involved with, he's very adept at juggling all of the things that make Star Trek successful, at least on film. And even though this has all this political overtones and mystery story and everything, the tone is relatively light. There is a lot of humor in this film, and it just works, and it's got sort of an airy feel to it, and I really liked it. And it is really a fitting send-off for the original cast members. And when the film ends, you actually see their signatures of each character as one by one on the screen, and it's kind of a nice send-off. It was also dedicated to Gene Roddenberry, who passed away just before the release of the film, although he did get to see it before he died. I really liked Star Trek VI. I would have to give it probably an 8.5 out of 10. I would say it's my third favorite, maybe oscillating between second, depending on whether it passes the voyage home or not. Star Trek 2 is going to be my pick for the favorite of the original 6, but then you've got Star Trek 4 or Star Trek 6. The old adage is that the Star Trek movies, the odd ones are terrible and the even ones are the good ones. I don't know about that. Like I said, I really enjoyed Star Trek 5 much more than I thought I would, but I will say that the first Star Trek film and Star Trek 3 are probably, I guess my least favorite two entries. So there you go. That's my look at Star Trek 5 and Star Trek 6. And next week, I'll be tackling the first of the Next Generation films. There'll be Star Trek First Contact. And I'm really looking forward to watching the Next Generation films for a couple of reasons. One, because I've never seen them. Two, because I know there's an overall shift in sort of the whole tone of the series, and because you've got a completely new cast of characters, it's probably going to take a little bit of adjusting for me, because I was never a really big fan, not that I didn't like it, I just never watched it, of the Next Generation TV series. So this will be interesting. I'm actually going to be watching it with some friends who are huge Next Generation fans, so they really enjoy the films, and they've told me they don't think I'm going to like the Next Generation film. So we'll see what I think next week with the first one, Star Trek First Contact. As always, thanks to Planet Shannon TV and Shannon for starting the Countdown to Star Trek Into Darkness series. And so I have a link to her channel below. Of course, Gray 1951, who is also doing this, I'll have a link to his channel below as well. And Shannon is actually compiling a playlist of all the entries of everybody that's playing along. So check her channel out for that, so you can see everybody's perspective on the Star Trek series. So everybody should be at least up to Star Trek 6 at this point, at least if they're going on a week-to-week basis. So thanks for watching, everybody. As always, feel free to rate, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And feel free to check out my other videos here on the Media Assault channel. Thanks for watching, and take it easy.